Good day and welcome to Nurture for the Soul. I'm Reverend Dr. Aaron Wade, your host for today's webinar. I serve as the Minister for Congregational Leadership Development, Granting, and Scholarships on the Faith Education, Innovation, and Formation team, often referred to as Faith Info. We are a part of the Justice and Local Church Ministries within the national setting of the United Church of Christ. Nurture for the Soul is a weekly webinar offering sharing practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources and engaging critical topics for local churches and people of faith. Produced by Justice and Local Church Ministries of the United Church of Christ, we faithfully focus on care and education for the people of God. From culture and community organizing to congregational leadership, from worship and theology to resourcing small and rural churches, from ministries with youth and children to wide-range justice issues, featuring guest artists, authors, and key leaders in our nation. Nurture the Soul stays current to how the gospel is alive in these times. This is a space for connection, community, and nurture. Together, we can bring our church, our community, and the world towards the world God imagines for us all. Join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Nurture the Soul, and look for special offerings from time to time as well. We are always producing opportunities to engage, and you can find a full list of upcoming digital programming offerings at ucc.org/events or any of our social media platforms. Friends, if these conversations move you, if what's offered here helps enhance your ministry or your soul, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this and the essential work of the United Church of Christ. And I want to say thank you in advance. We are on the third episode of a four-part series on revitalizing church practices. So far, we have explored new church planting strategies for success, multiple streams of income through 501c3s, and today we will look at navigating the waters of writing effective grant proposals. Today, we're here to provide valuable insight and pearls of wisdom on applying for grants. Specifically, I'd like to highlight some of the grant opportunities offered by the United Church of Christ to set the stage for our discussion today. Next week, we will conclude this series with exploring effective grant making. This series will be targeted towards individuals, organizations, and groups that are looking to have philanthropic arms. If you're looking to make grants, create grants, we want to make some recommendations on best practices and how to effectively do that to create change. Each episode will feature a panel of seasoned experts ready to share their wisdom and experience. Before we get into our panel discussion today, I want to take a brief moment to touch on some of the grant offerings available through the United Church of Christ and their focus areas. As it stands, our grant cycle opens on June 1st each year, and it closes on September 15th, respectively. Here are the funding programs available and their focus areas. There are four that I will mention today. The first is the Operational Financial Support Grant. This grant offers financial assistance to local churches in crisis, assisting with operational costs like staffing, equipment, and utilities. The second grant is known as the Neighbor in Need Fund, or NIN. This fund is seed funding for congregations and organizations addressing systemic injustice and community disparities at various levels. Funding is for program development centered around outreach and/or justice advocacy. Our third grant source is known as the CASA, New and Rebirthing Church Grants. These grants assist faith communities affiliated with the United Church of Christ, aiming to achieve sustainability through coaching and financial support, with the goal of supporting those accepted applicants for 4 years over continued funding, with the goal of assisting in achieving long-term sustainability. The fourth grant is the New Church Plant Health, Dental, and Pension Board Support Grant. This grant helps new sustainable churches cover health, dental, and pension costs for their key leadership. It gives over 3 years with decreasing amounts each year starting at $10,000. That's a little bit about the grants that I provide oversight for here at the United Church of Christ. Please note that we have a UCC grant and scholarship brochure that was developed recently and is made available through a link that's being placed in the chat right now. We also have scholarships, which we did not mention, and this webinar is not about. Scholarship applications will open on December 1st and will close on March 15th. So be on the lookout for information on our various platforms around scholarships that we have. There are 17 scholarships that you will be able to apply for. All right, let's get into today's discussion. So I want to invite our esteemed panelists who are with us today to share their expertise with us. But before they share their expertise, I want to get them to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask that they would now come on screen by unmuting their mic and unmuting their camera. We're going to first have Andrea Brown, followed by Elder Vernon Richardson, followed by George Garcia, and then Jose Gallino. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the introduction and thank you for this platform. I think it's so needed and so necessary. And at the rate that you provided, I am grateful to you that you do that. So my name is Andrea Brown, and I work for DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, which is the district's independent art agency. I am a grant manager there. I just started in April. I am a native Washingtonian. I moved to Philadelphia, and I was there for 12 years, where I served as the Director of Children and Youth Services. But I'm happy to be back in the district and to be working with you all. I do have 7+ years of experience working as a independent grants manager and just working with small businesses to help them to get their businesses off the ground. So nice to meet you all. I'm looking forward to having this conversation today.
Hello, everyone. I am Vernon Richardson. I have about 15 years of grant management experience, starting with kind of grant reviews, then moving on to grant management and program management and grant writing. Right now, I serve as Director of Development for Empowerment Enterprise 2. And I also do grant management, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Community Concierge Care, which is a healthcare organization in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Garcia, and I'm the Grants and Partnership Specialist with the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs. On behalf of the Mayor and Director Bowles, thank you so much for having me here today. I have about 12 years of experience directly managing grants, starting in my early years in my career in Southern California, and then I transplanted over to DC. Been in DC for about 8 years now. And I love the city. I love working with the community out here. So I've worked in different capacities, directly managing program management, then also writing grants, and now I oversee the administration of grants and managing the grantees that our office currently works with.
Hi, everybody. Jose Gaona here, also in the DC area. I would describe myself as a movement builder. I've been working for almost a decade with the Hispanic community all over the United States. Have been lucky enough to work on a range of issues, from immigration to education to financial wellness and literacy, and have been really lucky now in the last couple of years to take on a couple of new challenges, adding conservation work in there nationally with grassroots organizers, with community leaders, federal stakeholders, as well as adding LGBTQ, Latinx work into that mix. And so specifically coming into this space with the hat of what it means to be a movement builder and what it means to be working within my community as it relates to grants, because of course, when you're building a movement, you gotta be able to feed some people and pay for some costs. And so, there's a strong component of financial need and grant making and distribution, redistribution that comes into movement building. And we've done a lot of that with the organization that I'm representing today, the Latinx History Project, which is rapidly growing to be the largest coalition-rooted LGBTQ organization in the United States and Latin America. Very lucky enough that we got ricocheted into the space of grant allocation during the pandemic at a time when our communities were disproportionately underfunded in that time of crisis and immediate need. And not to brag personally, but our organization is very proud of the fact that we were able to raise $200,000 in a month. And our budget is small. We're a small grassroots organization still to this day, mostly volunteer run. But we were able to raise that money and then go through the process of building an international coalition of organizations with that funding that was regranted for emergency relief. So those are the hats that I'm wearing today, and very excited for this conversation. And thank you so much for putting it together.
As I told you all, we have a panel of subject matter experts, and I'm glad that they're with us today. I'm going to say again, Andrea, Vernon, George, and Jose, thank you all for being here. Let's jump right into the discussion. I'm going to start with asking a question to Andrea. Andrea, can you share your perspective on effective strategies for organizing when seeking grant funding and crafting compelling grant proposals?
Absolutely. And I would hope that you all are taking notes because I have a lot to say, and I hope that you'll ask questions as well. So I would say the first thing that is important to do is to understand what your organization, what your church's mission or vision is. If you do not know, how can you ask for what it is exactly that you need? And then also, I think it's important to note that the grantor also has a mission and they also have priorities as well. So I would encourage you, and I always do this when I'm writing grants for our organizations or small businesses, to visit the webpage, and they're always going to have a grants section on that webpage. See who were recipients last year. Also look and see what the requirements are for what it is that you're applying for, and follow instructions. It sounds like it's intuitive that you would just know to follow those instructions, but if it says 1,000 characters, do not give 1,001 characters. That might bump you out. So as a grant manager right now, I can tell you that we more than doubled the amount of recipients that we had this year, more applicants than we've ever seen. And do you know how easy it was to weed out the ones that we could not receive simply because they did not read eligibility, they did not read what it is that we were looking for, and they were amazing, and it broke my heart. And so please just follow those instructions. There's also going to be opportunities for you to speak with those grant managers who work in those organizations in most cases. I know for DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, we had live chats every Friday. We even had some live chats and workshops on the weekend. And before you submit your application, make use of the resources that grantor is offering to you. In my case, I was able to look over applications before they were submitted, and I would say, you know what, this is going to go before the panel. The panel may not understand the narrative like I do because I can have the conversation with you. The panel does not have that conversation. They don't have heartstrings attached to you. And so in most cases, you cannot say anything. I've watched people's wonderful applications go before panels, and I could not say, well, they didn't mean that. They meant this. So really craft your story, craft your vision, your mission, talk about the impact that it's going to make, how many people will be reached, quantify, add numbers there. I'm a story person, but there are people who want to hear the numbers. That's great. But what are the statistics around that thing? And be clear and concise. I would say answer the question and you can add all the stuff later, but make sure that you are following the instructions and the guidelines there. Share evaluation. Talk about the pre and the post of your project. That's extremely important. They want to know, is this money gonna be effective in what we're providing it for? Make sure that your project or your proposal is feasible. Are you asking for $1 million to add a bathroom in your church? Are you looking to add a wing to your church for $1 million? That makes sense. History. Do you have a history of providing interim reports and final reports, or do you miss those? That's extremely important. Make sure that you're hiring people who are going to help you to do the job that they have signed up to do. Sometimes you can hire someone who will not have put you all in the best light for future funding, and they're not even attached to you. They're just a contractor. So consider that. And did I say quantify? quantify. People love numbers. I'm not that person, but I understand the importance of that in the grant making process. In short, please tell a compelling story. No one knows your story like you do, and you are not going to be there to speak for what your project will be proposing, but your narrative will. So I'll leave it at that, but I would love questions later if anyone has any.
Andrea, that was a wealth of information. Oh my God. I wish that was already on a document or something. And so we could provide that as a resource. That was a perfect checklist. And I know when I'm reviewing grants, those are some of the things that we pay attention to, is the request balance. Like if you're asking to redo a bathroom and the expectation is out of range, it doesn't make sense. Can you justify it? If you have that as a tool that's typed up, trust me, I would love to get it. And I'm sure many folk who are watching this program would also love to have that. So if it's not typed up, maybe we can get it out to folk later.
Definitely.
Okay.
I will definitely share that with you.
Perfect. Thank you. George, I'm coming to you next. Now, I know you. We work together in the mayor's office. I work as an advisor. You work in the office, actually, and we've come to know the work that each other do. It's very similar work. I manage the grants for the National Center of the United Church of Christ. You manage the grants for the mayor's office of LGBTQ affairs in the District of Columbia. So my question to you is this: when reviewing grant proposals, what are key elements that you look for that demonstrates the ability of the grantee to effectively carry out what they said they would do? And how do these elements, grant applications help you assess their capacity to carry out the proposed work successfully?
Thank you so much for the question. It's a great question. And I think Ms. Brown really, encapsulated very well what the elements of a successful application are. But to answer your question, it's really a story. You're telling a story about your, when we're reading an application, we should be able to understand who you are, what is the purpose of the application, why you're applying for the funds, what is the need, and how is that lining up to the goals of the funds that you're applying to, and how does that align with the mission of your program or your organization. You have to really remember that when you are writing an application, you are writing, you should be writing as if the person knows nothing about your organization. You should not rely on the relationships that you have with other organizations, grant making organizations, or your network to really convey what your story is. You have to be able to concisely tell that story in a way that is aesthetically also pleasing to the reader, because you can lose the reader halfway through your proposal, and they start to miss components of your application. And a successful application, when reviewing it, really tells a concise story about your organization, your program, and the need. We also want to see, in a successful program, we also want to see a history of success. So what have you done in the past that can demonstrate that you can do the work that you're proposing to complete in your proposal, and also point out success stories that you've had in the past. We also want to be able to, if I know nothing about your organization as a reviewer, I want to be able to just Google your organization, your program, and then see what you have done. I mean, a lot of organizations, when they apply, if I don't know who they are, I will Google them and look up their website, look up their programs, and oftentimes I will not see anything on what they're proposing. I understand that takes time and resources to update a website, but oftentimes that can be the deciding factor for a reviewer when considering an application. And also a key component when reviewing an application on the reviewing side is a clear budget that aligns with your proposal, and a clear work plan that aligns with your proposal. Once I read the application, I should be able to look at your budget and say, that's exactly what I saw. I understand how they're going to use these funds. I understand that bathroom or that wing, how you got to the $1 million. If it's all personnel, then you should be able to describe how those funds are being used, how their time is being allocated. it very concisely. And the work plan really, really saves us a lot of time. Sometimes if we don't really understand what a component of the narrative, we can oftentimes look at your work plan or your budget and then kind of piece together what it is. Those are some of what I like to call the saving grace of an application, is that if I don't understand something, with your narrative, or if I don't understand what you're proposing or your goals, I can then look at your work plan or your budget and see piece it together. However, you shouldn't also rely on a reviewer to look at those other components in order to understand what you're proposing.
Thank you so much, George. I think you just said some powerful things in your piece and your response. One of the things that I heard that I think most folk may not pay attention to is that your digital presence, being on having a website, Facebook, Instagram, that funders do look at those, that reviewers look at those to see what's happening in your organization. So it's important that if you're using a 501c3 separate from your church, that you have some transparency there. Sometimes they look at financial statements and annual reports to identify what's going on. So I think that's good. Now, from the response that you, George, and Andrea gave, it may feel a little overwhelming for folk, especially folk who have never treaded the waters of writing grant proposals, or who don't have staff persons because they're a small entity and they're barely trying to make ends meet, but they have a missional vision. I want to go and I want to be able to open up a food pantry. I want to be able to help with opioid awareness. I want to be able to highlight the arts program that our young people are doing at the church, and we want to get some funding behind that through our nonprofit. What would you all, this is an open question, this is an open question for anyone to answer. If I'm just for the first time trying to write a grant, do I just write from my head whatever I think, or is there a tool that helps me to be able to identify what to say and direct it and organize and format my proposal?
I would say, so grants come in cycles. There are times of the year where the grant becomes available. So for instance, at my organization, for my department, our grants have closed. We have just given out our grants for FY24. It is not ever too early to start that process of looking to see what are the requirements. Do not wait. Do not wait to start working on your application. You might, say, well, it's due a month from now and I have time. There's so much detail in each of those sections. And guess what? The grantor is going to have resources for you, and make use of those. If they're giving you a person, that's the best thing they can give you. They're going to tell you what your application needs to look like to be your best representation before the panel. There are some organizations that have panels, and so we select content experts to look at your application, and then there are organizations and they look at them internally. So just consider that if you're going to be going before a panel, speak with someone in the organization that's going to help you to choose your words carefully, to highlight your story, highlight what they're looking for. They know what they're looking for. So just make use of the resources that you have. They're never going to want to see you fail. They want to actually give you the money. The money that we have, we want you to have it. So just know that they do have your best interest at heart, and to make use of those resources, and also to honor the timeline for which you have to apply. Very important.
And thank you, Andrea. I would also add looking at the proposal itself, right? So there are a few different things, a few different sections, right, that could really be a resource. The eligibility section. Make sure you're eligible first. You don't want to go through the tedious process of composing and submitting a grant proposal when you're not eligible, right? Also, look at the Q&A, or question and answer section in the proposal. A lot of the questions that, a lot of people would potentially ask, they compile, a lot of agencies compile those questions and give Q&A. And some of those Q&As are also living documents. And so as more questions come about they may include those, if not on the proposal itself, on a agency resource like their website or something like that as well. So I'll say look at those as well.
Thank you all for that. And for those who may have never, ever written a grant, like when I first started, the questions that they want you to answer can be found in the proposal. You don't have to figure out which way to go, how to go there. They literally say, for this section, tell us about your organization's mission and vision. And it literally will walk you through. And if you could actually simply answer those questions as thorough as possible, it will help you get to a developing and effective proposal. My next question is for Jose. Jose, please enlighten us on the importance of sustainability for organizations and how grants can help in achieving that goal.
Yeah, I want to take this time here in answering that question to really speak to the soul, because I think ultimately, we're speaking here to try to engage with individuals that, for whatever reason, they feel really passionately about their mission. And it can be a hard thing to have that sense of vision and passion and mission. And I know I'm guilty of this. And kind of taking that vision and mission personally. And you want, every project, everything that you're working on, that you're asking for funding for, to get the funding. And so it can be kind of difficult oftentimes. And I'll preface this by saying, I've worked with one-person teams. I've been a one-person team working with organizations that were not even filed yet, didn't have their C3 status yet. We're just an idea, right? And I've worked with, multi-million-dollar national, international nonprofits servicing millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. And seeing, the vast difference in the funding accessibility, there isn't a difference. But whether you're on a really, really big ship navigating those waters, or you're in a little dinghy, the core principle is the same. The waters can be rougher at start. If you're in a little dinghy and you just have that idea, or you're just a one-person team, it can be very difficult to navigate those bumpy waters because you're working with a smaller boat. But the principles are there, and the principles are the same. And you have to be rooted in a well-refined vision for change, and whatever that that purpose is to you as an individual or as an organization. It really is what builds that sustainability. And so, looking at like the long-term viability, you want to make sure that even if you're just getting started, that you have a clear sense of drive and purpose and vision, that you're in pursuit of your mission in all of the work that you're doing. And if you really have that like well-built, like tight ship, the water's not coming through, because you know what your mission is, what your driving force is. And every step along the way, as you're encountering sometimes these, long processes to apply for grant funding, you already have a solid boat to navigate those waters with. And that, time and time again, makes a huge difference. I know I'm really kind of speaking to folks that understand that on a personal level. But that's been my experience in the importance of sustainability. Grants, of course, play a fundamental role in diversifying revenue, in working on specific projects, right, and building out a sense of longevity. I've seen it in some areas more than other, where an organization will have an incredible vision and mission, a group will have an incredible vision, but it's that long-term piece, right? It's the thinking long-term about what it is to create those diverse and sustainable sources of revenue that sometimes can be the downfall. And so a well-oiled kind of tight ship, whether you're on a dinghy or you're lucky enough to be on a cruise ship, to navigate those waters when they're rough, when they're smooth, really, just makes all the difference. And it also makes a personal difference, because most of this work is personal. I know most of my work is very personal. I think about it on my off time. There's kind of not a moment that you're not thinking about that mission when it's such a personal endeavor. So making sure that is also, really, tight and refined helps. because then it helps you navigate the ups and downs of not getting every grant, right? But still knowing that it's a learning experience and you have to kind of move forward and taking advantage of the resources. I mean, speaking to what everyone else has said, oftentimes when you're wearing the many hats, guilty as charged, being the web designer, the comms expert, the program manager, the operations and accounting and bookkeeping, and you lose sight of the fact that there's actually a lot of resources there for you. And so, take advantage of those resources. That's something that I still have to remind myself about, but that's how I would start to navigate that question.
Exceptional. Thank you, Jose, for that. I think that was really good. I'm going to have a secondary question based off that. I'm going to pose it to the whole panel. So as a fledgling organization, a small organization that has a vision. So we got a dinghy, you got a church, and it's like, we want to do some work that we don't have enough tithes and offerings and pledges that's coming in to be able to substantiate the work we want to do for our food pantry, for our canvassing in the community, for our youth back to school night. So we go after a grant and we're like, okay, this grant is going to be worth $30,000 and it will help to cover the entire cost for our program or missional vision piece that we want to do. They don't get that entire grant. They get awarded half, $15,000. Are there any recommendations that you all would say as we look at sustainability for a project or even trying to sustain an organization? Because there's different sustainability models, right? I just want to make this project possible, or I'm trying to grow a nonprofit to really have staff and everything like that. Would you all have any recommendations for how to maneuver amongst grants? Because just because you apply for a certain amount doesn't mean you're going to get it. You may not get awarded at all. So any recommendations there for folk who are like, what's the strategy? How should I maneuver? How should I position myself? Should I apply for more than one? Any recommendations?
I feel like I always have something to say, but in my last position, I was on the other side of what I am now. I was not a grantor, I was a grantee. And our salaries depended on getting these grants. And so we layered. And when I started there, and this has been the history of that organization, there was always at least 5 grants that we had in rotation. And so when one was about to come to an end, we were applying for the next cohort, and we just continued to do that. We always ate and we always had the lights on. But that's the same. I would echo the same sentiments now, that if you have the capacity to do this, always apply for more than one grant at a time. And also make sure that you don't knock yourself out of eligibility, because if you're applying for one organization and they may be offering 5 different grants, you may not be able to duplicate the same proposal for more than one grant. And they may say, well, you cannot get any of them because you've applied for the same. So just make sure that you're not knocking yourself out of eligibility, but also just layer grants. We had some grants that you could only purchase food and drink, and some you cannot purchase food and drink. We had some that you could only purchase supplies, and we had general operating support. And that was a catch-all. Anything we needed, transportation, someone needed car fare, there was emergency, we needed to get a bed to a family, we could use that. So I would say diversify and to apply for multiple. You just never know what you might need that for.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I would also add that on just to piggyback off of Ms. Brown, is that yes, continue to apply for as many opportunities as you can qualify for, and keeping all those dynamics in mind. But also, it's really important to have a working functional budget for your organization for the entire year. I have worked for organizations who didn't really have that piece organized, and it was very hard to apply for grants because you didn't know what you needed in order to apply. So, for your example, you got half. So now you have half of what you need to operate, and with this annual functional working budget, you now know you've been able to cover salaries, and now your next application will cover supplies and some of the administrative costs of running your program. So knowing exactly where you need to apply those funds, and when you apply, that makes it easier to write your narrative, how to construct your budgets, how to construct the actual proposal that you will send in to be considered. So it's really important not to just apply, to be strategic about how you apply, and be very thoughtful about long-term goals.
Very good. Thank you all so much for that. Elder Vernon, I have a question for you. Could you share some strategies that you've used to successfully write grant proposals that secured funding? So, we have those that don't get awarded, and then we have those who have successfully. Can you tell us about the ones that you may have successfully accomplished, and what were some of the strategies you used to successfully write that grant?
For me, there are a couple of things, right? So I think the most practical one is making sure, that the organization that I'm writing on behalf of has the capacity to actually do the program that we are proposing. So number one, know your capacity and write at capacity. Second would be to really utilize material that you already have access to, right? So I don't remember if it was George or Andrea who mentioned earlier, but build on existing proposals that were already successfully awarded, right? So make sure you build on those. That's something that I do often. But even within that, making sure that you are very effective at answering the question, right? So even though you're building off of a pre-existing proposal, you want to make sure that whatever answer that you're providing in the new proposal, that you're answering the question. So first and foremost, answer the question. And then secondly, tell your story, right? So I think the most successful grant applications or grant proposals are the ones that not only highlight, your company's or your organization's mission, vision, and capacity, but also, are very strategic at how you answer the questions, and making sure that the grant reviewer or the people who will be reading your application, they not only see that you can do the work, but they also see how your organization is actually set up to do the work, and how your organization has historically done the work. So definitely cater your answers specifically to the question, and make sure that the reviewers can see your organization actually doing that work.
Thank you so much, Elder Vernon. We have a question that almost is like a follow-up question, and it could have been answered by you when you just gave that response. Before I read the question, I want to encourage folk that if you have questions, you can put them in the question and answer section that can be found at the bottom of the page. And either one of our panelists will answer it personally in the chat, or we will call it out and we would mention it here. We have a question from Reverend Wanda Thompson that says, does it make sense to have a generic proposal ready to go, but that you can tweak for specific grantors?
Yes. The long and short of it, yes. I think, as I said, you always use the resources that are readily available to you. And if it is great content that really points to the work that your organization does, you definitely want to have that and be able to kind of shift it and pivot according to specific questions in a proposal.
Did anyone else want to? Okay. What are some of the common pitfalls that you all have seen, experienced, or witnessed that some grant applications fall into?
Procrastination.
What is that? Tell me about it. What do you mean when you say procrastination?
The deadline is the deadline. Okay. So if it says, Monday the 3rd at 4:49 p.m., Do not send it at 5 because you will disqualify yourself. And so always give yourself time, to be able to submit, factor in time for technical difficulties, factor in time for, user error, factor in time for, just to be able to complete it. So do not wait to the last minute, because sometimes there will be that one little thing that will push you over, and you will disqualify yourself simply because you procrastinated.
Elder Vernon, I feel like you were coming for me. I feel like you were throwing something at me, because I've experienced that one too many times. Now, maybe it was the Holy Spirit of me feeling some type of way, but yeah, I've experienced that. And it's not a good feeling.
Okay, that was me preaching to myself. They say something like a sermon don't hit unless you preach to yourself first. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Are there others that you all would like to mention?
I would say we always tell in our workshops, we always tell our prospective grantees to have others put eyes on their application before they submit it. So sometimes you're working so closely to your application that you can overlook just little errors here and there, and we do take those things into account. And also using jargon that is particular to your organization. We don't know what PCM is and CH8 and all those different things. So have others look at your application before you submit it, so that it can kind of hit home for those who are going to be reading it, so we can understand what it is that we're looking at.
And I would definitely advise that if you're applying for a new program, you should still, if the application is asking for an expected amount of people served, that you give a number. Oftentimes I've heard, we don't know yet. And I'm like, okay, well, how many people do you engage in the year? How many people do you typically engage in this realm of work? When you're proposing your work, that's what it is. It's a proposal. You don't have to have hard numbers. If you have hard numbers, that's great. But if it's a new program, write to that, explain that, and then give us your estimates, because that at least gives us an idea as to what our return on investment would be as, the grantor.
George, you just said something that I hear from so many people. I haven't done it yet. I don't know. It's a proposal. It's a proposal. Now, we don't want to just pick numbers and things from out of the sky, but you definitely want to look at what is the realistic capacity. What are you expecting the intent, the reach will be? That's really important. If you have not done the work before, it's okay. You're making a proposal. You're looking and assessing who you have access to as far as staff. You're looking and assessing what's the need in the community, and how, if you had this project, that it would be able to create a level of impact. It's a proposal. Thank you for saying that, George.
Correct. And so, just to get back at your food pantry examples, if you know that you serve, you have so many people visiting or patroning your business or your organization, you can take that into account. And if it's not a large number, then build in an outreach component to your program, where you will say, I'm going to be out in the community three times a month, raising awareness, and through that effort, I expect to bring in an additional 50 people, so, and then from there, if you're awarded, you can always work with your grant monitor to work out, make changes to your proposal, or to your expected outcomes for the year. In all reality, they are your best friends. Once you receive those funds, they are your best friends. And they are there to be a wealth of knowledge for you, because we want to make sure that you are successful. Because when you're successful, we're successful.
Thank you. I have a question that came in the question and answer section from Libby King. The question is, what are some ways for a beginning organization to convince grant providers of their sustainability? And I'm thinking this comes out of, when organizations are new, most folk are like, we don't know who they are. They don't have the capacity. So let's keep that in the context of that, maybe.
Jose? I'd love to speak to this a little bit here to start us off. I think, first and foremost, to the individual that asked that question, Libby, thank you for asking that question. It's not an easy question to ask, and I've been there. I want you to know that. I want folks that may be having that same question come in, or that can feel like they can relate. I want them to understand that you're not alone. If you're working within, the confines of you're creating a new program, there's no precedent set, within your existing structure where you can rely on, that credibility or past relationship with other funders to speak to. You're dealing with a little bit of a tougher challenge, because you have to then figure out, how do you communicate sufficiently, and sufficiently may mean different things to different, funding sources. And so you have to try to understand that first. Take a look at what the funding sources are that, are out there, the grants that you may be applying to. And as folks have shared in the past, look at past recipients and see if you can pull in context or information, maybe connect with somebody in the past who's had to do the same thing with that particular individual entity that you're looking to pull funding from without that pre-existing relationship. There's always a strategy there to try to pull in. There's always, someone that may have, been in that same situation that you can pull some knowledge from and recommendations, because you don't want to go into that proposal space blind. If you're working within, the situation where you have precedent there, sometimes it's just a matter of taking a look at that, really refined impact, statement that you might have, or mission, and figure out what the rewording is or the restructuring is that you need to build out to sell an extension of an existing program that is something new, even if you're a new organization. I think, the end recommendation there being, do not give up. You have to get creative when you're in that space of building a reputation as you're going, right? Building the plane as it's taking off. You have to get into that, creative mindset of trying to build on context clues to really make the strongest sell possible. And many organizations and entities are also in the situation where they're already doing the work, they just need the funding for it. And that's a whole different conversation about being proactive, right? And having foresight to start managing your impact before you're applying to funding. If the work is already underway, or the start of the work is underway, but you're still new, you're still building that reputation, don't forget to start tracking that community impact in as much of a quantitative way as possible, because that will then add to your reputation, right? I mean, it'll speak for itself. But it is a difficult, that's one of the rough water spots to be in.
Jose, you just said something key that I want to highlight one more time. You said a lot of stuff that was key. Not that it was just that one thing, but this one thing I think is useful, because I remember when I started out, and I thought that everything that we did as it relates to the grant had to happen during the grant period. And I did not count. We're already touching folk. We're already serving folk. Those are counts that you should be counting. You should be taking pictures whenever you're doing these things already, because that counts towards work that you're already doing. Even if it's one person, the pastor or a leader that's going out and serving, that counts as a part of how you tell the story. So it doesn't have to be a big thing where your vision is already. What you've already done can count. So please don't write off and say, oh, well, they're not going to look at that. No, I've touched 5 people. We've touched 5 people by going to the homeless shelter, and we gave survival kits, which included That's data. That's important to highlight, that you're doing something already in the field. Thank you for that, Jose. We have were you about to say something else, Andrea? Okay, I thought you were moving on mute. We have a question from Paul Boyd Batstone in the chat. It says, do you recommend that churches provide a section on their website to describe their successfully completed and ongoing grant projects? Somebody can unmute. I see heads shaking in different directions.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, you should definitely, I mean, you don't have to have one that says the successes of this program, but you should definitely highlight the successes of your programs on your website, on your social media accounts. You should be able to show the community, what is it that you're doing out, and all the good that you're doing, because that could also be a way for you to raise, unrestricted funds, donations from people who are looking to help. If they're looking to serve, to grant or to give money to a church, they might find you online, and they might see the great work you're doing and engage you. So it is a good idea to highlight the work. I mean, and also a lot of organizations, they put out an annual report, and then they post that on their website so that you can download and actually like look at pie charts and graphs and numbers. But that might be something that's further down the road for some of the newer organizations. So the medium or the small to medium and larger organizations, that's what they consistently do, and you should try to work up to that. But in the meantime, having somewhere where people can where you can showcase your work is a very good idea.
It could even start as a programs. Here are the programs that we offer, and that could be a starting place. That's good. All right. Elder Vernon, I thought I saw you unmuted. Did you want to ask a question? Answer the question. Sorry.
No, I think George and I were on the same page. He actually said exactly what I was going to say as it relates to kind of posting your annual report. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both for that. So let's do this. This is a question that a lot of folk are waiting for. It was asked last week on our webinar. Someone said, where can I go to find grant funds? It seems like it's a tight-knit community where if you don't know about it, no one tells you don't know. Are there any public spaces? Are there any websites that you all would recommend that folks should go to just keep abreast of what's being offered? Anything?
There was one I placed in a chat earlier. Before I came back home to DC, anyone can get these grants, but I do know that there's a section for churches there. It's called Urban Awareness, and it's led by Tracy J. Brown. And I had placed that in the chat earlier. There are wonderful opportunities that I see there. I think they're listing opportunities every single day, from Nike to ones you've never heard of before, just looking to give money. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. I can place that back in the chat. Okay, I see it was placed in the chat. I would recommend that one.
Any others?
Go ahead, Elder.
I was going to say grants.gov, of course. And so like grants.gov is a federal grant clearinghouse, where you can find what most federal agencies are how and where they're funding. Also take a look at your local government, be it like state or city government, to see if they actually have any clearinghouses as well.
And I would add to that Google. It's a great starting point. And also networking. So going out into the community network and getting to know community members. Oftentimes they can point you to an organization that is, has an application open that you may not be aware of, and just asking questions. Closed mouths don't get fed, right? Another is for example, the DC Clearinghouse, and we'll post that in the chat as well. You can sign up and you'll get, daily, weekly emails of all the opportunities that are coming available through the DC government. And really just really utilizing your networking, because that's where you can, where you will find a wealth of knowledge where maybe someone can review your applications. I feel like networking really is at the center of my suggestions.
Yeah, I would love to echo that to George's point, and to take us also offline in our searches. I do think that we really need to take from some of the lessons of folks that have come before us who have had to build these movements, and find funding. For many of our communities, at times when maybe the funding was not all coming our way. Right. Just to kind of put it out there, right. There were times in our past where movements, global movements, had to be built off of, pennies in comparison to some of the, other movements and other charity work that was going on. And so being creative in our pursuits, connecting, but to take us back to one of the earlier points of our conversation, if you didn't capture it, if you're not, preserving what's happening, it didn't happen. And I would go a step further, and that's a lesson that I actually took from an older mentor of mine, who was one of the original organizers of the LA walkouts. which for those of you who don't know is one of the first times in history that young people organized a walkout in protest of non-inclusive educational materials in East LA. And so, one of the things that I took from that mentorship, and one of the biggest lessons that was always communicated to me, was you got to make sure that it's captured. You got to make sure that you're holding on to the proof of what's being done, because if you don't, it didn't happen. And that's just how society perceives things. And to take that, the next step over, if you don't talk about what happened, it also didn't happen, because we lose it to history. And so, you have to be that advocate, that person planting that seed to all of the people that you're meeting who have networks, who have relationships within these funding communities, to then also be ambassadors of your mission and your work, because every person you meet has the potential to connect you to hundreds more that may have a way of connecting you to a funding source. And I've seen that work directly in a lot of my work, where just simply sharing my passion, my vision, my dreams for the work that I'm doing has led to folks then coming back to me with those funding opportunities and saying, hey, this is the vision you have, this funding opportunity is for you. And so you're planting those seeds, but then that's all coming back to you.
Thank you there. Andrea?
I'm sorry. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to also mention DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. We are grantors, and we do provide grants for arts and humanities practitioners and artists. We do actually have some of our grantees are churches, and there are a number of programs that you could write proposals for. And one of our grantees, they host a festival every year. We have projects, events and festivals grants. So yeah, just every state has a arts council, and you can always connect to them and see if you're eligible for grants with your arts council locally.
One resource that I know I have used, it comes with a fee, but I think the fee is worth it. It's a national database called grantstation.com. And I know that if you, as a nonprofit, if you have a nonprofit, you can join TechSoup, which is, they give a lot of software, a lot of various things at a very discounted rate for nonprofit. Microsoft and all of those things for like free. They even offer grants for nonprofits, but grantstations.com is one that I would say, grantstation.com is one that I would say look at, because it can pull grants from all states, from federal government and everything like that. So it's a very useful tool. All right, y'all, we're approaching time. So this is the last thing. Give us a pearl of wisdom that you would say if you would want to leave one. You don't have to, but if you have one that you want to say, this thing right here, I want to leave with you in this moment, what would that be?
If you are not awarded the first time, do not give up. Try again. Ask for panel notes. The organization will give you notes on what was discussed about your application, whether you are awarded or not awarded. If you have an opportunity to sit on a panel, see what is discussed in that conversation, and it'll help you to craft a better application next time. Even if you were awarded, to see, how can you keep it up? But be encouraged. I'll end it with that. Be encouraged and continue to seek out opportunities. Grantors are looking for you just like you're looking for them.
I would say oftentimes grantors recycle their the way that they structure their requests for application, their RFAs. So, and oftentimes you can find them online. You can read past years' RFAs and see the patterns that they're using, and you can start to think about how to structure your proposal. You can also reach out to say like the mayor's office of LGBT affairs, request a meeting with me, and I can advise you well before we even announce our funding opportunities, because once we announce our funding opportunities, I really cannot advise anyone. But you can always reach out and pitch an idea, run, and I'll give you my feedback. I'm interested in making sure that every application that comes that we receive that it is successful. So asking questions, get engaged, and ask for help when you need it.
Also, it's okay to partner, right? So you don't have to always do this on your own. There are other churches, there are other organizations who may have more capacity, have greater capacity for the program that you're looking to do. And so it's okay to partner with them until you are able to build capacity as well.
I think my brief words to leave folks with would be relentless. Be relentless in your pursuit and be relentless in your desire to fulfill your mission.
Oh my God. Thank you all. That's all the time we have for today's discussion. I hope that the discussion has provided you some useful information around strategies for writing effective grant proposals and how to approach grant proposals. Once again, I want to thank you to our wonderful, our dynamic panel today, Andrea Brown, Elder Vernon Richardson, George Garcia, and Jose Guyona. Thank you for giving of your time so that we can carry out the work of justice and bringing about a just world for all. Remember, for those who are watching, that this is a four-part series. Join us next week for our final discussion on effective grant making, creating grant opportunities that foster impactful change. As always, we are grateful for your presence, your gifts, and your questions. Thank you for being with us today and all along the way. Join us every Thursday at 3:30 Eastern Time for Nurture the Soul, and look out for special offerings from time to time as well. Again, we are always producing opportunities to engage, and you can find a full list of upcoming digital programming offered at ucc.org/events or any of our social media platforms. And if you missed it up front, please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your prayerful and financial support helps programs like this in the essential work of the United Church of Christ. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to close out with a brief blessing and allow us to go on our way. We thank you, Creator, for this opportunity to gather where wisdom was shared. We thank you for the panelists and the great work that they're doing in the world. We ask that you would bless them and use them to be a conduit of change, a conduit of energy and resources so that multitudes will be blessed. And we ask also that you would bless those who are watching this. We ask that you would have opened up their minds so they can think creatively on how to approach getting other dollars outside of tithes, offerings, and pledges through grant writing. We ask that you would allow resources to walk in their way. Let people and networks open up for them so that they too will be blessed and be a blessing to the multitudes. Divine Creator, we thank you and we bless you for this gift of time. It's in the name of the one who set the captives free, we do pray. In the name of Jesus, amen. Have a blessed day, y'all.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.